He made America laugh with just one word: Dy-no-mite. But behind the bright smile and iconic catchphrase, Jimmie Walker was caught in a battle most fans never saw coming. At 78, he's finally breaking decades of silence about the tension, the heartbreak, and the truth behind his explosive feud with co-star Esther Rolle. What really happened on the set of Good Times? And why did Walker wait until now to reveal everything? Before he was a television star, Jimmie Walker was just a kid from the South Bronx, hustling his way through life in one of New York's toughest neighborhoods. Born in 1947, Walker grew up in the projects, raised by a single mother after his father walked out. It wasn't glamour, it was survival. He once described his childhood as dirt, poor, but not hopeless, and credits his mom for keeping him focused and out of trouble. While other kids were dreaming of basketball stardom or getting swept up in street life, Walker was different. He was obsessed with electronics, building radios, tinkering with wires, even working as a technician at WRVR, a local jazz station. That early discipline paid off. He eventually studied at the Technical Vocational High School and scored a job with WRVR as an engineer. But then came the unexpected pivot: comedy. On a whim, he started performing stand-up at small clubs around the city. Audiences loved him. His timing, his energy, it was electric. He wasn't trying to be slick or political. He was raw, funny, and relatable. That's when producers started to notice. One night, he hit the stage. The next thing he knew, Good Times came calling. From the sound booth to the spotlight, Jimmie Walker was about to become a household name. Jimmie Walker wasn't just cast in Good Times, she detonated into it. Premiering in 1974, the show was a groundbreaking look at a black working-class family in the Chicago projects. But it didn't take long for Walker's character, J.J. Evans, to become the center of attention. With his lanky frame, infectious grin, and iconic catchphrase, Dy-no-mite, he stole every scene, and almost overnight, became a pop culture phenomenon. The role was electric. JJ wasn't just a comic relief, was the spark. Kids imitated him, adults quoted him, and network executives loved him. Ratings soared every time JJ hit the screen. Walker was suddenly everywhere. Talk shows, commercials, magazine covers. He went from unknown to unavoidable in a matter of months. But behind the laughter, there was friction. While Walker's star kept rising, his co-stars Esther Rolle and John Amos were growing concerned. They believed Good Times was supposed to tell real stories about black families, about struggle, dignity, and unity. To them, JJ's over-the-top antics were becoming a distraction, turning the show into a cartoon of what it set out to be. Rolle once said bluntly, "We were not there to do the jigaboo show." Still, the audience couldn't get enough of Walker. The network leaned in, pushing JJ to the forefront. And Jimmie? He kept showing up, cracking jokes, and doing what he did, bestowing the room. Whether it was comedy gold or creative tension, there was no denying it. Good Times had made him a star. But as the spotlight intensified, so did the pressure and the backlash. And the tension was only getting started. What started as a simmer quietly boiled over. Behind the laughter of Good Times, a very real, very personal rift was forming between its breakout star Jimmie Walker and the show's moral backbone, Esther Rolle. Rolle, who played the fierce and principled Florida Evans, had envisioned Good Times as a family-centered drama that happened to be funny, not a sitcom built around exaggerated antics. As JJ became more cartoonish and the show's humor skewed broader, Rolle became increasingly disillusioned. She saw the shift not just as creative drift, but as cultural harm. To her, JJ was no longer a lovable goofball, he was a stereotype. His wide-eyed mugging, loud clothes, and relentless "Dy-no-mite" catchphrase were, in her eyes, reinforcing outdated and damaging images of black men. And Walker, still in his 20s and riding a tidal wave of fame, wasn't inclined to tone it down. He was giving the people what they wanted, and the ratings agreed. The two barely spoke off camera. Rolle was reserved and deeply committed to her craft. Walker, a stand-up comic at heart, was used to flying solo and chasing laughs. Their creative differences became personal. "She didn't want me on the show," Walker would later say. "She thought I was a buffoon, that I wasn't real." Eventually, the tension became untenable. Rolle left the show after season 4, citing the direction it had taken, and though she would return later, the damage was done. The chemistry was never quite the same. What could have been a powerful collaboration between two strong talents became a cautionary tale about artistic vision, fame, and what happens when success pulls people in opposite directions. But even without her, Walker kept going, still flashing that grin, still yelling, "Dy-no-mite!" But as the show changed, and the times did too, was about to learn that fame can fade just as fast as it explodes. For a few golden years, Jimmie Walker was everywhere. Talk shows, magazine covers, sold-out stand-up gigs. But when good times ended in 1979, something unexpected happened. The phone stopped ringing. The problem wasn't his talent, it was JJ. JJ Evans had become so iconic, so burned into the American imagination, that casting directors couldn't see past him. Producers weren't calling Jimmie Walker. They were calling the ghost of JJ, and then deciding they didn't need him after all. Hollywood can be cruel to those it pegs too tightly. Walker found that out the hard way. He auditioned, he pitched, he hustled, but every time the feedback was the same. "We loved you as JJ, but this just isn't the right fit." His comedic skills hadn't dulled. His timing was still razor sharp, but to many, he was frozen in time forever, a 1970s catchphrase. Walker did what he could. He returned to stand-up, his original love, and stayed on the road. He appeared in guest roles on shows like The Love Boat, Fantasy Island, and Murder, She Wrote. But the roles were small and often forgettable. He was no longer a rising star, he was a relic of a specific moment. And yet, through it all, he never publicly complained. "I was never supposed to be a huge television star anyway," he once quipped in his stand-up. "I was supposed to be the guy before the star came out." He tried writing, producing, even hosting a radio show, but the shadow of JJ loomed long. For some, typecasting is a slow fade. For Jimmie Walker, it was a full stop. The fame had been explosive, but now he was learning how to survive in its echo. If JJ Evans was the voice of the streetwise, working-class black youth of the 70s, Jimmie Walker the man was something very different. As the decades rolled on and good times faded into nostalgia, Walker began re-emerging in unexpected place-stock radio, cable news, panel shows. And with that came a surprising twist: his politics. Unlike many of his peers in Hollywood, and particularly in black entertainment circles, Walker leaned conservative. He wasn't a firebrand or ideologue, but his views often ran counter to expectations. He was skeptical of government programs, critical of what he saw as victimhood culture, and unapologetically old school in his thinking. He made appearances on The O'Reilly Factor, sparred with political pundits, and expressed admiration for Republicans like Ronald Reagan. When asked in a CNN interview about President Obama, Walker famously said, "I don't think he's a good president. I think he means well, but the policies aren't working." It was a stance that raised eyebrows and ruffled feathers, especially from someone who once played a symbol of black progress in America. Many fans were stunned. Others were outraged. Some accused him of betrayal. But Walker stood firm, often saying, "I'm a comic first, a thinker second, and a politician never." Still, his outspokenness made him a regular guest on conservative media and something of a cultural curiosity. A black comedian from the inner city who didn't walk the expected political line. He never officially aligned himself with any party. He described himself more as a realist than a partisan, but the label of political outlier stuck, and he didn't seem to mind. In a world that tried to box him in from the confines of JJ to the assumptions about his race and upbringing, Walker seemed to relish confounding expectations. Agree with him or not, he said what he thought. And in that way, maybe he was always the same kid from the Bronx, sharp-tongued, unpredictable, and determined to carve out his own lane even if it made people uncomfortable. For a man whose character was larger than life, Jimmie Walker's personal life was surprisingly quiet, almost mysterious. Despite decades in the spotlight, Walker never married. He never had children. That's not the story most fans expected from the guy who brought so much energy and charm to television screens across America. In candid interviews, Walker revealed he'd had plenty of romantic adventures, but settling down just wasn't his path. "I was chasing laughs, not rings," he joked once. Freedom and independence mattered more to him than traditional family life. He spoke openly about this choice during a 2012 appearance on The Wendy Williams Show, where he clarified that while he'd been involved with many women, marriage and fatherhood simply weren't in the cards. It was a decision he owned without regret, reflecting a man who knew what he wanted and didn't bend to outside pressures. This personal choice also reflected his larger-than-life career. Walker was never about following the script, either on stage or in life. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. The pressures of fame and expectations weighed heavily. Walker's straightforwardness sometimes alienated fans who wanted a certain narrative: husband, father, beloved celebrity. But Jimmie stayed true to himself, embracing his path with humor and honesty. His private life might have been low-key, but it was no less rich in its own way. It showed a man who valued his autonomy, stayed fiercely independent, and lived life on his own terms. For years, fans speculated about the tension between Jimmie Walker and Esther Rolle, powerhouse actress who played Florida Evans on Good Times. Behind the laughs and catchphrases was a deeper, more complicated story. Rolle was a classically trained actress with a mission. She wanted Good Times to be a serious portrayal of Black family life, dignified, resilient, and real. She saw the show as a chance to break away from stereotypes that had long plagued television. Walker, on the other hand, came from a stand-up comedy background. His character JJ was loud, flashy, and often Zanya's source of comic relief that won hearts, but sometimes clashed with Rolle's vision. For decades, their relationship was marked by creative conflict. Rolle worried that JJ's antics undermined the show's message, while Walker chased laughs and the spotlight. Now, at 78, Walker has opened up with surprising honesty. He admits there was real tension, but also respect. "Esther was tough because she cared," he said. "She believed in the mission. I didn't always see it that way back then. I was young, chasing laughs, but looking back, I see she was fighting for something bigger." Their disagreements weren't personal attacks, but clashing visions. Rolle's focus was social change. Walker's was entertainment. Yet, despite the friction, Walker credits Rolle with giving the show its heart and soul. He also expressed regret that they never fully reconciled before Rolle's passing in 1998. "If I could talk to her now," he said quietly, "I'd thank her for standing up, for teaching Muvin when I didn't want to be taught." Jimmie Walker's reflections pull back the curtain on Good Times, revealing the delicate balance between comedy and cultural responsibility. They show a man who, after decades of fame, can finally appreciate the forces that shaped his career and honor the woman who shaped the show's legacy. Jimmie Walker's journey is more than just a tale of fame and comedy. It's a story about resilience, growth, and understanding the power behind the spotlight. From the tough streets of the Bronx to becoming a household name, Walker's path wasn't always easy. He faced challenges, conflicts, and the curse of being forever linked to one unforgettable character. But through it all, he remained true to himself, bold, unapologetic, and endlessly entertaining. His candid reflections on Esther Rolle reveal a deeper truth about collaboration and respect. Two very different visions came together to create something unforgettable. Their story reminds us that art is never simple, and the sacrifices behind the scenes often go unseen. Today, Walker's legacy lives on not just in reruns or catchphrases, but in the honesty he's shown about his life, his choices, and the people who helped shape him. At 78, he continues to surprise and engage, proving that the story isn't finished and that sometimes the most powerful truths come decades later. So next time you hear Dy-no-mite, remember there's a lot more beneath the surface, a man who made us laugh, think, and see the world a little differently.